Welcome to First Mile's Climate Heroes. I'm your host, Bruce Bratley, founder of recycling company First Mile. On this show, we meet and learn from the climate heroes who are building solutions right now to tackle climate change. In this episode of First Mile's Climate Heroes, I'm delighted to welcome back an old guest, Henry Unwin. Last time we chatted on this show, Henry was leading sustainability at Nando's, and today he joins us from Daylesford Organic, where he is Sustainability Director. Daylesford Organic is a substantial food and lifestyle business, and Henry is leading their team to reduce impact and be a positive force for change across every area of their business to ensure they're making a positive social impact and building a healthier, more robust and resilient planet. Henry, welcome to First Mile's Climate Heroes. It sounds like you've got your work cut out at Daylesford.
There we do, and thanks for having me back, Bruce.
It's a pleasure. Daylesford, I when I was doing my homework, 20 years last year. So happy birthday to Daylesford. And they've pioneered organic farming and produce and brought it to our high streets. I'm keen in this episode to understand what others can learn from Daylesford and to find out how we can reduce and consume food more sustainably, which is a very hot topic for everyone, and particularly no less when the cost of living is going up. So how is life at Daylesford? What's going on? And how's the transition over from Nando's been? I mean, it's been a few years now, but I'm sure you still have fond memories. So what's the highlights at Daylesford?
It's such an interesting transition. So, going from a business that really had, huge scale, I think, 58 million chickens a year at Nando's down to something like 48,000 at Daylesford. So, the scale is completely different, but I think there's a huge amount you can learn from working at scale at a place like Nando's through to somewhere like Daylesford. I think the thing that got me excited about Daylesford is the fact that we own this whole system, the whole supply chain. So you're not constantly trying to convince your suppliers to change. You are your own supplier. 60% of the food that we sell in our cafe comes from the field next door. So it's that ability to have kind of direct influence on the ground and get closer to the farming side of things. So that's been a really interesting transition, and I've learnt a huge amount in what is it's been about a year and a half.
Are you the conduit for that change, or is it the chefs or the customers in the cafe and the people who are producing the food and who then say to the farm, you need to do it in a different way, or does it go through you, or does it happen and you're trying to get in on the act to say, well, hang on, don't do that because that's crazy from an environmental perspective?
No, it's almost got nothing to do with me. And what I like is it's very much a two-way conversation between the farm and the cafe. So it might be in the morning, it might be that something's in season today that wasn't yesterday, and therefore that influences what goes on the cafe specials. So it really is a process that happens organically, and it's just the way the business has been set up to, have a really close relationship between whether it's the market garden or the farm and the cafe. So, it worked for 20 years before I arrived. So it's definitely nothing to do with me.
So Daylesford it's called Daylesford Organic, and it's their name, and very, as I said, pioneering in that sort of organic field when it started to grow in the UK. But we now hear a huge amount about regenerative farming and British farmers becoming regenerative. Is organic farming now becoming slightly irrelevant, or are you embracing organic within a regenerative business model at Daylesford? How do you sort of sit those two things together, and are they the same thing?
Organic has never been more relevant. So, at a time where organisation and products are claiming sustainability credentials, it's more important than ever than those claims are substantiated. And, I think it's substantiated through external certification. So, the issue with regenerative is there's no sort of formal methodology or way of certifying or measuring, what is regenerative. There's some great work by the Sustainable Food Trust and Soil Association Exchange and the Savory Institute looking at sort of methodologies for measuring regenerative. But it's, organic has a legal standard behind it and a certification that you are organic or you're not. But having said that, I don't think we could ignore the sort of groundswell of enthusiasm that's happened behind regenerative. It's a movement that's only recently started, and you've had things like Kiss the Ground and Groundswell that suddenly have brought this into the picture like organic hasn't. Organic, I think the Soil Association was founded about 70 years ago. Organic last year was was £3 billion of the UK market, but it's only 1.8% of the food and drink market. So, in 70 years, we're still just 1.8% of the market. So I think there's a huge amount that we can learn from the regenerative movement in terms of how it's captured consumers. And big organisations like Nestle, have embraced regenerative. But, I think there's never been a more important time for organic, and certainly within Daylesford, it's part of our name, and we would say that we farm, regeneratively and organically.
And then we sort of slightly got ahead of our skis on this one. So can you just tell the listeners what regenerative is versus organic, and does organic sort of by default sit within regenerative, or are the bits of organic that aren't regenerative? If you can sort of try and answer that in relatively simply.
To answer that question, I'd say that there are sort of two main differences if we're trying to explain what regenerative is versus organic. So organic doesn't permit the use of herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, artificial fertilizer, and regenerative does to some extent. And then, just like I was mentioning before, organic has a certification system that is entrenched in law. To claim a product is organic, it's got to be certified. Whereas, to claim it's regenerative, you just need to have a marketing team that can kind of back it up with some words. But I think that's the answer today. If you were to ask me in a few years' time, it could be a very different answer depending on how the movement evolves.
I've got some friends who are moving into regenerative farming, and every time I Google regenerative farming, it's people looking at a hole counting worms. Is it all about the worms? And do organic farmers care about worms?
Yeah, organic farmers, soil is such a big asset for organic farmers, and worms are a huge part of that. They share so many things. Regenerative farming is all about building soil health, as is organic. And I feel like organic is maybe the North Star to point towards, and regenerative is a way that gets you there. I don't think that everyone needs to be organic. It's not necessarily the system that is going to be the way that we farm globally. But regenerative is a very good way of getting there. And they share so many of the same principles. But if you go to somewhere like Groundswell, everyone is on the floor looking at soil, counting worms, and it's the same. It's the same with organic farming. It's soil is key to both of those systems.
Yeah, and I suppose also, organic probably got a bit of a bad rep with farmers because they switched to organic, the yield went down and the weeds grew. Whereas, because actually the soil health and the biodiversity hadn't sort of been moved to over a gradual way. But as you say, it's sort of quite a nice sort of transitionary way of farming to get to that end point.
Yields are super important, but you look at like tons per hectare coming out of a field, and that's the way that traditionally in farming you measure the yield. But and it is true that organic might reduce that yield. But what I'm quite interested in, and what we're interested in at Daylesford is there another way of looking at yield? So we produce, we farm to produce food, and food we eat for nutrients. So instead of measuring yield in volume or tonnage, can we look at it in terms of calorie content, nutrient density? And I do believe that through organic farming, your nutrient density might increase per tonne, and therefore that's a more interesting way of looking at things rather than just the total yield.
Daylesford is still a business. This all sounds great, and fast-moving business, and it's growing, and it's a luxury business, or luxury-ish. I don't know whether you call yourself a luxury business or not, but it's definitely a sort of a premium. Is that quite a sort of a bit of a challenge with your work in sustainability and trying to make the business regenerative by nature? But you've also got these sort of commercial pressures as well, or are you finding the two can work pretty symbiotically?
They have to work, otherwise the business doesn't work. A successful, sustainable business has to be profitable, and the real challenge is how do you decouple economic growth with environmental impact. So the idea being that as your business grows, the positive impact it has grows as well, as opposed to many conventional business models where as your business grows, the environmental impact grows with it. The negative impact grows with it. So for us, the real challenge is, if we've really solved the problem, as we grow, we should become a force for good and a solution rather than contributing to the problem. So if we can work out how to farm in a way that captures more carbon than it releases, as the business grows, we should be increasing our positive impact. I'm not saying that we've got there yet, but the idea is, if we're selling a product that has a positive impact on the planet, the more of those products that we sell, the better. So, but that also brings on the challenge of price, and and there's no getting around the fact that many sustainable products do have a price mark attached that others don't. It's particularly around organic. Organic is a more expensive product. So there's something from the world of Nando's where the price point is maybe in a much better place compared to Daylesford. How do we get the farming system and the solution at the Daylesford side with something like the price point that is achieved elsewhere?
I did a bit of homework on this, and I was not surprised the price. I thought this price difference might be wider. I mean, it's still wide, but I thought it might be wider. So a cooked whole chicken in Nando's is £15 with your choice of peri-peri sauce. A fresh chicken according to the Daylesford website, a fresh chicken uncooked is £22. So there's it's a third more expensive for the chicken, and then you have to cook it as well. Do you think the Nando's chicken is going to get more expensive? Do you think the organic chicken will get less? Do you think we'll close that gap? Is organic always going to be for the rich, or are we going to eventually move over with organic or regenerative where that gap closes because businesses that are sort of producing food more cheaply are going to have to take consideration more of their externalities, and equally it might become less expensive to produce food regeneratively? Do you think it'll close?
Yeah, so I think there'll be a convergence. I think you've mentioned both of them there, where I think if regenerative and organic goes at scale, the price point will come down. But the word externalities you used is so important for a cheaper chicken produced more cheaply has a lot of hidden costs. If you took those hidden costs, those externalities into the cost of that product, so that might be chemicals in its supply chain, carbon in its supply chain, and you start pricing up those externalities, the cost would go up. So so I think there does need to be a change in price on both sides. But for me, organic is where the boundaries are pushed. It's where we can see innovation happening, and it's where we learn. We learn a lot about how to farm more sustainably. It doesn't mean that has to be the global farming system. We don't have to have an organic system, but it's where those that can should, and it's where the lessons are learned. And if we can, a real passion of mine is how do we take the innovations that are happening at Daylesford and apply them to a system at scale, and that might be the best of organic, but it doesn't necessarily have to be certified organic.
Yes, or totally organic. Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of comes out around the sort of the approach that Daylesford have written around in terms of what's the global sustainable solution for eating meat, because some would say, well, the problem's meat, stop eating meat. But I think at Daylesford you obviously grow a lot of meat. You've referenced the 48,000 chickens, and that seems to be a key part of an organic regenerative farm. What's your view on the sustainable solution for eating meat? Should we eat meat?
Yeah, it's such an important question. What I was saying about soil carbon earlier, the reason that we have this ability to capture carbon within our soils is through our permanent pastures. So our permanent pastures, our grass pastures, have a lot more carbon than an equivalent arable field. So if you took two soil types that are the same, the field with animals grazing, livestock grazing and permanent pasture has a higher carbon content in that soil. But those animals are also producing, a lot more carbon than a carrot in a field is. So the answer is really nuanced, and people get it's really emotional, and people get very entrenched in their views. The real answer is very nuanced and highly complex. It's not totally vegetarian or vegan, and it's not. A lot of people would argue that livestock is a solution to climate change. The real answer is we need to eat a lot less meat. We need to eat a lot better meat, and a mixed farming system. I think livestock play a really important part of a mixed farming system, but I think their part is often the significance of their part is often overplayed. But it's for us at Daylesford, livestock, we don't put any external artificial fertiliser onto our fields. It all comes in the form of slurry and manure. So they're really important for both bringing organic matter and fertility to our landscape, but also sequestering carbon into the soil. But it's it's nuanced, and there's some interesting, like Kiss the Ground was a really good documentary that went into some of that nuance. But there's no getting around the fact that we've got to eat a lot less meat, and we've just got to make sure it's as high quality as possible when we do eat it.
First Mile is the UK's leading waste management service. We help over 30,000 businesses reduce their carbon impact with our award-winning range of recycling solutions. go to our website, which is thefirstmile.co.uk to get started today. If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to subscribe. We have brand new episodes every Wednesday.
Coming back then, Henry, to your sort of one of your remits is of taking the work that Daylesford is doing and some of the innovations there, and educating other people and saying, well, this might be suitable for the global food system. That's sort of very much communicated in your sustainability actions, which are across three areas: regenerate, protect, and inspire, which I think is a communication. Can you explain sort of what's the sort of the latest things happening in those three areas and what their areas are aiming to achieve? It's a really interesting three-point plan.
Yeah, and I guess the 3-point plan comes from a space of, this is a strategy that I created, and I think it's, we went through a process that any business that doesn't have a sustainability strategy or needs to update one, I think this is an interesting way of doing it. It doesn't matter what your product is, what size of business you are. But the three things that we thought about when we did this is our impact, our brand, and our customers. So our impact is for me, if you're writing a sustainability strategy, it's where you've got to start. So it's looking at your environmental impact. So your social and environmental impact. So where does your business have the biggest impact on the world, both positive and negative? So you'd work that out by doing something like a carbon footprint or a materiality assessment. So you start with, where's the big impact? And for us, that's food and farming is clearly a big one, but it would also, be packaging, water, energy, waste. But where is your impact? And then the next bit is to look at the brand. So what is unique to your brand? Where do you have an ability to create change where others don't? What does your brand stand for? What's your vision? What is it that excites your staff? And then the third bit, and it's definitely so you might use your brand to help prioritise the first bit, but then the final bit, which is really about tweaking your areas of impact rather than driving the change, is your customers. And people often get this the wrong way around. They often start with customers rather than just use it at the end. So the customer piece is really about what connects with your customers. What are your customers interested in relation to sustainability? And what aspects of your business is really visible to your customers when it comes to sustainability? So for us, that's packaging. So if we were to start with saying the customers are the most important thing for our strategy, plastics and packaging might be the number one thing we go for. But so you look at your impact, you look at the brand, you look at the customers. We came up with these three pillars: to regenerate, to protect, and to inspire. So to regenerate is all about, this is all about the opportunity to restore what's been lost and damaged and return the earth to health. So regenerate for us is about food, farming. It covers three areas, which are soil, biodiversity, and animals. To regenerate is almost doing more of the good stuff, putting more carbon back into the soil, planting more trees. To protect is doing less of the bad stuff. So that's reducing our environmental impact. So that would cover energy, water, waste, plastics, packaging. And then inspire is the third pillar. And for me, this is a really interesting one. And we can't solve this crisis without collaboration. So inspire is going beyond the four walls of our business and being part of a movement around sustainable food and farming. So that might be bringing young kids onto the farm to learn, or connecting with farmers in the region.
When I came up to the farm and you kindly showed me around, there's sort of JCBs flying around all over the place, because obviously the family connection there. Are you starting to see new technology and robotic things appearing, and hydrogen-powered tractors and robotic chickens laying synthetic eggs, vegan eggs? What's going on the tech front? Is there a load of stuff happening there?
I think when it comes to the farming side, I think we're pretty low tech. There's some big bits of kit, but they're doing some pretty basic things. I think if you went into the regenerative agriculture has some really interesting tech going into it, with reduced tillage, direct drilling. There's all sorts of stuff that's going on there that we're maybe not doing at Daylesford. I think there's a role for technology, but I can't see it being immediately applied to our farming system. We don't have a huge number of people on the farm, and I think the market garden is probably the most sort of labour intensive aspect of the farm. So that's 28 acres of organic farmland where we get all of our sort of salad leaves, fruit and veg from. Having said that, there's some really interesting innovations in technology, whether that's sort of around remote sensing and And robotics is still a long way to go. But I think when you get to big conventional farms that are, they're applying huge amounts of inputs across a field, there's really interesting scanning technology that's just applying a pesticide or insecticide just where it's needed and fertilizer just where it's needed. So I think because we're low input, we don't have much of that going on, but the future for technology is huge. And hydrogen is an interesting one. Still some way to go, but you look at the power requirements of a tractor, and electric is not necessarily the way to go for big farm machinery. So hydrogen's a really interesting evolving space.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, a lot going on there. I've got some very specific questions now. You keep lots of bees at Daylesford, and I'm seeing local honey for sale all over the place, and increasing number of my friends are turning into amateur beekeepers. Has the bee population recovered now? Are we back to where we need to be? Are we peak bee, or have we still got a long way to go?
So the insect population hasn't recovered. There was this, was it George Monbiot talked about Insectageddon, where I think some places in Germany had found that 80% reduction in population of flying insects. I think bees, bees, there's all sorts of different bees. Everyone gets excited about honeybees, and actually there's so many honeybees in certain areas of the UK now that they're causing a problem. So they're out competing sort of pollen and nectar for other bee species. But yeah, we've got beehives on the farm, and they're an important part of a biodiverse farming structure. But bees get a lot of press compared to other pollinators that are equally important. So I think the honeybee population is in a very good space, but when it comes to other insects, it's we're a long way from where we should be. You kind of think back to when I learnt to drive, I remember one of the things that I used to do is you stick your windscreen wipers on to get rid of all of the insects that are squashed on your windscreen, and that just doesn't happen anymore.
And then the other issue with food production across the developed world, and it's an issue in the UK, is about 7% in the UK of food is wasted before it leaves the farm. This is because of ugly shaped fruit, or surplus requirements, or seasonality, or supermarkets change their mind. Estimated to be worth £1 billion, that food that is wasted, ploughed back into the fields, or left to rot in the farm. Is that lower at Daylesford? Is it lower with organic or regenerative? How are you addressing that problem?
That's a problem of scale, I think. So it's a problem of scale and monoculture. So when you get one crop grown at scale, generally for a big retailer, that's where the issues arise. So they have high aesthetic standards. So not quality standards, but aesthetic standards. Does it look like they want it to look? If it doesn't, it doesn't get picked. So that issue really arises when it comes to monocultures at a big scale. At Daylesford, it's there's various ways that we get around it, and we strive to be zero food waste from the farm side. So the market garden I was talking about earlier, that's 28 acres. It's got 300 types of fruit, veg, salad, and herbs, and 200 types of cut flowers. So in 28 acres, you've got this huge diversity. So we're not producing loads of one crop at one time that then gets wasted. So we've got a mixed and diverse farming system, but we also we have things like a fermentary. So if we do get a glut of a certain crop, we can preserve it and ferment it. When it comes to other products, certainly on the meat side of things, that we make soups and broths out of bones and cheaper cuts. So it doesn't happen with us, but it's such a big problem globally. And the stat that gets bandied around is something like a third of all food we produce we waste, and you quite rightly say a lot of that is on the farm. It doesn't even get past the farm gate. And the amount of land we use, an area the size of China, just to grow the food that we throw away, and it's criminal. Yeah,
staggering. So Henry, that's a brilliant whistle-top tour of Daylesford, and we've got a good insight in terms of what's going on there. You're on Climate Heroes. You're definitely a climate hero, doing so much to progress sustainable farming and sort of the world of regenerative and organic food production. How on earth did you get into this world? What's the Henry story?
I don't know if I'd describe myself as a climate hero, but I grew up on an organic farm in Cumbria, and that really, my passion for sustainability started off with spending all my time outside out in the countryside. And my dad had a passion for conservation and organic farming, so So he converted we had a tiny farm. He converted it to organic, and I got quite interested in that. And then my school holidays, I worked for a local bookshop that specialised in environmental philosophy, and kind of read some interesting weird books. Then I studied environmental anthropology at university, which kind of got me more sort of formally interested in it, and thinking there might even be jobs that exist, whenever that was 15 years ago. So really my journey started, my roots are in organic farming, in the countryside, in conservation. After uni I worked for regional government writing climate change policy in Northamptonshire, and then got into sustainability consulting, and then as we mentioned, worked at Nando's. So I wrote the sustainability strategy for Nando's as a consultant, and then went in-house. And then the move to where I am now is really feels like I've kind of come back to my roots in organic farming, and I've done a bit of a full circle. But it's been a really interesting career. And I look now at the number of companies embracing sustainability, the number of jobs in this sector. If you were to put sustainability into LinkedIn, you'd get, I don't know how many thousand new roles every day. Whereas when I first set out, I would sit on LinkedIn and refresh it once a week, and then eventually a job came up in Northamptonshire, and I said, right, I'm going to Northamptonshire, and everyone thought I was, bonkers.
Well, it is brilliant, actually, because, 15 years ago, if ever you were going to do a degree not to get a job, it would be climate anthropology. But now everyone's going, oh, that's interesting. That's amazing to do, to have that.
Yeah, I just wish I'd listened when I was doing my studies.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. And what's coming up in the next 12 months that you're sort of excited about at Daylesford? What's the big news?
Yeah, we've been organic farming for 47 years, and as a business, we've been selling direct to customers for 20 years. We've always been doing some good stuff, but I feel like there's a big step change in terms of how we think about sustainability, creating a strategy behind it. So we talk about to regenerate, to protect, and to inspire. So we've got the kind of the structure and the meat on the bones about what sustainability means to us. I think the big things that we're doing this year are putting targets against those, so we can have some real measurement of progress against those pillars. A big one will be around carbon and net zero. Once we get to the bottom of this question about how much carbon do we sequester versus emit, we'll be able to set a really powerful climate change target. And then the big one I'm slightly reluctant to talk about, because we're currently, fingers crossed, is a B Corp certification for both Daylesford and Bamford. So we're certified organic, and Bamford is certified through Positive Luxury. But B Corp really feels like a different level, and it's a really great way to engage with our customers and show that we're not static in this space, and that continual improvement is key. So we've got our fingers crossed for that one.
On this show, we're building a Hall of Fame for climate heroes, and we always ask our wonderful guests to leave something in First Mile's Climate Heroes Hall of Fame. So, what or who would it be?
I'd put the Lorax, the Dr. Seuss book.
Excellent.
In there.
I love that.
So
book.
It's brilliant, and there's a quote. So there's like this fur. The Lorax is this kind of furry creature caught up in this sort of capitalist consumption world of deforestation, and he says. So I wrote it down here. He says, "Mister," he said with a sawdusty sneeze, "I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. And I'm asking you, sir, at the top of my lungs." And then he goes on to say something which quite profound, which is, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not." So I'd stick the Lorax in there by Dr. Seuss.
Brilliant, I love that. And if you could have a one-to-one with Rishi Sunak or Sakir Starmer, might be soon Kasir, what would be the key message you'd land on them?
I think you look at we set up a legally binding framework with the Climate Change Act, and it just feels that our progress against that is so far off where it needs to be. So I'd love to see not just a sort of future-facing climate policy, but really stringent targets on climate action that cover the near term and not just net zero by 2050, which is not in their leadership period. So I think the question would be around immediate action and immediate progress to targets, rather than being able to fall back on quite a distant net zero target.
Henry, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on First Mile Climate Heroes again. Super guest. Thank you so much. Have you got a message or anything you want to say to our listeners while you're on the airwaves?
Go and read the Lorax. Or it's also a film as well. So you can be 5 or 50 and you'll love it.
Perfect. Henry, thanks a million for coming on the show.
Brilliant. Bruce, thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me. Nice to catch up.
I'm Bruce Bratley, and you've been listening to First Mile's Climate Heroes, where we meet incredible people making an impact to tackle climate change. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and subscribe to the show. We have brand new episodes every Wednesday.